Welcome back to the Making the Madness team preview series. We are continuing today with the Virginia Cavaliers.
The starting five for the Cavaliers will be Kihei Clark, Tomas Woldetensae. At the three, you have top 70 recruit Jabri Abdur-Rahim. At the four, you have transfer from Marquette Sam Hauser. And at the five, my ACC preseason player of the year, Jay Huff.
I think looking at this team, the obvious, you know, positive for this team is going to be in the front court. Having Jay Huff as well as Sam Hauser. Hauser can come in. I think he'll probably end up leading the team in scoring. He's just a really good overall scorer. He's a good shooter. He can, pass. He's high IQ player. I think he's a player that's going to be absolutely huge for this team offensively. And then Jay Huff, who's Mr. Triple Double, can block shots at an elite level, good rebounder, good inside scorer. He can step out and shoot a three. I think that with this Cavaliers team, uh, you're looking for a reason to really like this team. It is in the front court with those two.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Jay Huff is a fantastic player. You see people talk about, well, can he be the ACC player of the year with what he's done in the past? He redshirted his freshman season, played sparingly the next two seasons, but was on the team. He just played behind Jack Salt on the championship team, and I don't think he logged a minute in the championship game. But here's the thing about Jay Huff. He was a project, but you can't forget he was a number 61 in his recruiting class of 2016. This isn't a guy who came out of nowhere. He was a top-end recruit. He just took a while to get to where he is today. And we saw last season, when he had the chance, he was a fantastic player. He had 8.5 points per game, 6.2 boards. But he wasn't even the number one option in terms of big men on that team. It was Mamadi Diakite. And Jay Huff, really in his first season of playing big-time minutes, was great. I mean, he even shot 35% from deep. He's 7'1". He's an elite defender. And the moment I look at defensively that shows how good he is, it's that game against Duke. Vernon Carey Jr., one of the best physical big men in the country last season, had a wide open lane to the basket. Huff had to travel a little bit to get to him and block the shot to win. That's what happened right there. And it wasn't an easy defensive play for Huff. He was off a little bit to the side, and he went pretty fast for a 7'1" guy to get to Carey and block the shot. That was just a fantastic play. And you look at what he did against Miami. I think the final score is like 46-44, typical Virginia game. But he scored the first 17 points of the game. I mean, this is a guy, when he gets going, he gets going.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll say one thing. Jay Huff did play in the national championship for about 2 seconds in 2019, because I remember they threw him in there just so he could like defend an inbounds pass with like 2 seconds to go in the first half.
Oh, gee. But I said he didn't log a minute, so technically he didn't log a minute.
I guess that is fair.
Yeah.
Backcourt, the one player who did start for Virginia on that 2019 national championship team, Kihei Clark. He's just a really good overall player. He's a good defender. He's, offensively, I think he's somewhat limited in what he can do, but he can certainly score the basketball. He's a good defender. I just think, and he's a good passer as well. He's a really good, just overall floor general. He's not going to wow you with anything, but he's what you need on a team that, you need that experience, and I think he brings it.
Yeah, my few reservations with Kihei Clark, he got pretty careless with the ball at times last season. That really was an issue for Virginia early in the season when they struggled. You look at some of the games they lost, like at home against South Carolina, that was a pretty brutal loss. And, Kihei Clark just early in the season just didn't look right. It was his first, Ty Jerome was gone. He was given all the role of handling the ball, and he struggled with it early. He turned the ball over a lot. He fixed that a little bit down the stretch. But in this Virginia offense, you cannot turn the ball over the way he was. I think he had 6 or 7 turnovers a couple times. You just cannot do that the way this team plays.
Yeah, definitely. On the wing, I think Tomas Woldentensae, he's going to be a good shooter. That's kind of what you need. He made that big shot to beat an abysmal North Carolina team. Jabri Abdur Rahim, he's a you mentioned him. He's a top 70 player. He'll come in. I think him or Morcell will one of them will start for Virginia this season, and I think the key is to as long as he can shoot better than Casey Morcell, that's a plus.
Yeah, definitely. And the bloodlines for Jabri Abdur-Rahim are pretty great. His father, Sharif Abdur-Rahim, played at Cal, played a long time in the NBA with the Hawks and a couple other teams. So that kind of just growing up around an NBA locker room kind of thing is probably big for him. Being able to shoot hoops with his father growing up, who was a great NBA player. And you mentioned Casey Morcell, who's going to come off the bench more than likely. It's almost hard to be as terrible as he was offensively last season, but he's a really good defender.
Definitely. And speaking of Casey Morcell, that's where we head to the key reserves for this Virginia team. Casey Morcell obviously headlines the list along with Reese Beckham, Cody Slotman, Francesco Cafaro, and Carson McCorkle. With Morcell, he was just abysmal shooting. He couldn't hit the side of the backboard a lot of times. I do remember, I think he hit a three to either tie or beat Arizona State early in the season.
Arizona State, yeah.
But aside from that three, I don't think he made another one the entire season. But he can't he can't shoot any worse than he did last season. So there is that going for him.
Yeah, he was a disaster shooting. I think 28% from the field and 17% from deep. Terrible. That's just what it was. But he was still logging 15 to 20 minutes a game. And it's due to his defense. Tony Bennett knew he was getting nothing offensively from him, but he knew that defensively he was going to be a stopper. And Reese Beekman is another top 70 recruit. He's a good point guard who will, replace Kihei Clark in a couple seasons. But he's much bigger than Kihei Clark, a different kind of player. I think he fits this Virginia team well. He doesn't turn the ball over a lot. I'd like to see what he does scoring at this level, but if Kihei Clark struggles, he could probably take some minutes from him. He'll probably log 15 to 20 a game. And then you mentioned Carson McCorkle and Cody Statman. Those are two guys who are pretty good shooters. Statman hasn't shot the way that people expected him to coming into Virginia the past few seasons, but McCorkle is big skill coming into this season as a true freshman is shooting, and that could be something they use a lot this year.
Yeah, and the one player I kind of look at is Francisco Cafaro. He's pretty good, productive in his minutes last season. I think in the future, when Jay Huff graduates after this season, Cafaro is going to be the player that's going to step right in, be the next really good Virginia big man. He's big 7-footer. He can really defend. He can rebound. He can block shots. He can score in the paint. I really look for him to kind of have a good 6-man role this year.
Yeah, definitely. I think Cafaro will definitely play a role this season behind Jay Huff if Huff gets into foul trouble, which isn't really his thing, but he can at times. That's just how it is for big men. But if Huff gets in foul trouble, they can definitely use Cafaro, and I think he'll be a pretty good player. And they're kind of taking the road with him that they did with Jay Huff. They're just taking it slow and steady, and when the time comes, the time comes.
Yes. And then the other thing, it is hard to foul out with this Virginia team because it's hard to get 5 fouls in a game as a player when you're playing at the slow tempo that Virginia does.
Yeah, definitely. It's, they drain the shot clock every possession on offense. They play pretty suffocating defense. So the same thing ends up happening when they're on defense. You don't see many guys foul out for Virginia. The big-time departures for Tony Bennett's squad this season is Mamadi Diakite, an all-ACC player last season, and a big factor on the 2018-2019 championship team, and then Braxton Key.
Yeah, looking at Diakite, I think he's the big loss. Averaged 13.7 points per game, was really, for a long stretch of time, the only player you could rely on to actually score the basketball for Virginia. He's a good interior scorer, good defender as well, and started on that 2019 Virginia team that won the national championship. he'll definitely be a big loss. As for Braxton Key, I think he he obviously you don't want to lose a experienced veteran like Key. He's definitely a good defender, but offensively, Virginia really doesn't. If in some ways Virginia gets better because they add Sam Hauser, who's more of an offensive weapon, so they can go a little bit more small. Have Abdul Rahim at the three, and I think Braxton Key was kind of limited in what he can do.
Definitely, and he struggled with a wrist injury this season, which limited his already limited offensive ability. And Diakite, he's just a do-it-all 6'9" forward. He's going to be very much missed.
Yeah, and Diakite is pretty much the only player I think that will be too horribly missed. Obviously, at this point I would say Jay Huff's going to be pretty good at the center spot, but if DKT would have returned, which he doesn't get to another year of eligibility, but let's say he does, that would move Sam Hauser to the three, which I think would have been good for the team, but that's a hypothetical world, and in reality, DKT's college career is done.
Yep.
Looking at this Virginia team, I think the starting question is, can they remain number one in defensive efficiency? I say yes. Jay Huff obviously defending. I do think they get a little bit worse defensively with the downgrade from Diakite to uh, Sam Hauser, but I still think Virginia can lead the nation in defense.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just Virginia's always going to be a good defensive team. Hauser's not a great defender. He's not terrible. He's just not great. But we've seen before that Virginia can get away with one guy on the floor not being a good defender. Kyle Guy, we saw it in the past, and that was almost more important since he was a guard. I think that they can absolutely still be the best defensive team in college basketball.
Yeah, and they can hide Hauser if they need to. I don't know if they'll need to hide him as much as maybe they have needed to hide like a Kyle Guy, but certainly they'll find a way to, I think, remain number one in defense. The more important question, though, is can they win the ACC title? Regular season, Duke never wins it, so I would say Virginia would be the team to beat, certainly.
Yeah, overall, I think Virginia's going to win the ACC. Duke's a pretty good team, but there's a lot of youth, a lot of question marks there. And I know you and I both are pretty big on Louisville. David Johnson's a fantastic guard. Then you have a lot of just other guys who are really good too, with Carlik Jones, Samuel Williamson, Malik Williams. They just have a lot of pieces that I like a lot. Louisville's going to be a very good team this year. I'm pretty upset to see that Chris Mack and the Cardinals don't want to play Kentucky this season. That's pretty brutal. But I do think Virginia's going to win the ACC.
Yeah, and I would say Louisville would be the team I'd be maybe the most scared of. I am big on the David Johnson sweepstakes. I have him as a top 15 player in the sport going into next season. He's my breakout player of the year, but certainly Virginia, I still think it. Even if David Johnson wins, is the best player in the ACC, Virginia just has more talent, more experience that is needed to win the ACC title.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime Tony Bennett's such a good coach, he can. It's just incredible to me what Tony Bennett does year in and year out. I feel like he's still underrated as a coach. You'll have those people that say, they lost to UMBC. UMBC was a pretty good team. Should Virginia have won? Yes. But quick tangent here. The one thing that people forget is DeAndre Hunter missed that game. He was hurt. He got hurt, I think, might have been the last game of the regular season before the ACC tournament. But that team wasn't going to go that far, even though they were the number one overall seed. I wasn't surprised they got picked off early. I was just surprised it happened by a 16 seed. DeAndre Hunter was the sixth man of the year in the ACC, and he was hurt. Like, that was a brutal loss.
Yeah, definitely, and obviously, you're still supposed to beat UMBC, but if you go the next year and win the national championship, you get the full redemption.
Absolutely. They did beat Texas Tech.
But can they get the ultimate redemption and win the second straight NCAA tournament. Uh, I think there's a chance. I would still say they're behind a lot of teams that we've mentioned. We've mentioned previously. I think Gonzaga, Villanova, Baylor, uh, Illinois, Kansas, like those teams are going to be there. But Virginia, I still put as like a top 10 team going into next season, and certainly they have a chance to win it all.
Yeah, definitely. I like Gonzaga more. I like Villanova more. I like Baylor more. I like Illinois more. Those are the four I can definitely say I like more than Virginia. I don't remember where I had Virginia off the top of my head. They might have been five. They were five or six. I'll say they were five, but that could be wrong. But they're a top seven team at worst coming into the season.
Yeah, and top 7 teams, all you need is the ball to bounce your way and a few different games, and you're national champions.
Absolutely.